What if I told you that a single moment between a man and his dog would change everything everyone thought they knew about justice, loyalty, and the truth? What you're about to hear happened in a maximum security prison just 3 days before an execution was scheduled to take place. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the most profound truths come not from courtrooms or confessions, but from the unconditional love of a four-legged friend who never stopped believing. Let me paint you a picture of that gray October morning. Convicted of armed robbery that resulted in the death of a store clerk, he'd maintained his innocence through every appeal, every hearing, every sleepless night in that 8x10 concrete box he called home. His lawyers had exhausted every legal avenue. The governor had denied clemency. Time, as they say, had run out. That's when Marcus made a request that stopped everyone in their tracks. "I want to see my dog," he told Warden Richardson during what was supposed to be a routine final meeting. Just once more before next Friday. The warden, a stern man who'd overseen dozens of executions, paused. Last requests weren't unusual. A final meal, a phone call to family, sometimes a visit from clergy. But a dog? In 30 years of corrections work, he'd never heard anything like it. "Mr. Williams," the warden said, adjusting his glasses, "you understand the protocols. We can arrange for immediate family members, spiritual advisors." "Rex is family," Marcus interrupted, his voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of desperate hope. "He's the only family I've got left." The story behind that statement would break your heart. 8 years earlier, when Marcus was arrested, his girlfriend had left town, taking their shared bank account but leaving behind one thing, a 3-year-old German Shepherd mix named Rex. With no family to claim the dog, Rex had been surrendered to the local animal shelter. But here's where the story gets interesting. A retired teacher named Eleanor Patterson had adopted Rex just days before he was scheduled to be euthanized. Eleanor had followed Marcus's case in the local newspapers not because she believed in his innocence or guilt, but because she'd seen the photo of Rex in the shelter and something about those intelligent brown eyes reminded her of her own dog she'd lost the year before. The warden made some calls, regulations were bent, paperwork was expedited. And 2 days later, on a Wednesday afternoon, when the autumn sun filtered through the prison's razor wire casting strange shadows on the visitation room floor, something extraordinary happened. Eleanor Patterson, now 78 and walking with a cane, led Rex through the prison's security checkpoints. The dog, now 11 years old with gray around his muzzle, moved with the careful dignity of age, but his ears perked up at every sound, every scent. The visitation room felt different that day. The usual cacophony of crying children and hushed conversations between families seemed to quiet as Marcus was led in, handcuffed and wearing the standard orange jumpsuit. His hands shook, not from fear, but from anticipation. And then Rex saw him. What happened next defied every expectation. This dog, who had spent 8 years in a loving home, who had bonded with Eleanor, who had every reason to have forgotten the man who'd abandoned him to fate, did something that brought hardened corrections officers to tears. Rex didn't just recognize Marcus. He remembered him. The dog broke free from Eleanor's gentle grip and rushed across the room, whimpering in a way that sounded almost human. He pressed his entire body against Marcus's legs, looking up with eyes that seemed to say, "Where have you been? I've been waiting." "Hey, boy," Marcus whispered, his voice cracking as he knelt down as much as his restraints would allow. "Hey, my good boy, you remember me." But Rex did more than remember. He began doing something he'd only ever done with one person in his entire life, a trick that Marcus had taught him as a puppy, a silly little routine they'd practiced in their tiny apartment before the world fell apart. If you've stuck with me this far, do me a favor and hit that like button. The story is going somewhere I promise you won't expect. Rex sat perfectly still, tilted his head to the right, then to the left, then offered his paw in a specific sequence: right paw, left paw, then both paws while rolling onto his back. It was their secret handshake, unchanged after 8 years of separation. Eleanor Patterson watched from across the room, tears streaming down her cheeks. She'd never seen Rex do this routine before. In 8 years of loving care, he'd never once performed this elaborate greeting for anyone else. "He's been waiting for you," she called out across the room. "All this time, he's been waiting." But then something else happened. Something that would change everything. As Marcus reached down to pet Rex, the dog did something unusual. He began pawing at Marcus's left ankle, whimpering and circling in an agitated pattern. It was the same behavior Eleanor had noticed at home whenever Rex got anxious about thunderstorms, except there were no storms that day. "He's trying to tell you something," Eleanor said, moving closer. Marcus looked down at his ankle, then back at Rex. "I don't understand, boy. What is it?" Rex was an alibi that had been overlooked, dismissed, forgotten in the rush to close a case and satisfy public demand for justice. The room fell silent except for Rex's gentle panting and the almost imperceptible hum of fluorescent lights overhead. 8 years of appeals, 8 years of legal briefs and court proceedings and expert witnesses, and the truth had been waiting in the memory of a faithful dog. Eleanor Patterson made a phone call that afternoon that would restart Marcus Williams' case. A veterinary behaviorist testified about canine memory. Security footage from Marcus's apartment building, previously overlooked, was re-examined. A neighbor came forward, remembering seeing Marcus that night, limping as he climbed the stairs. The execution was stayed. The case was reopened. And, 6 months later, DNA evidence from the crime scene, evidence that had been sitting in storage for 8 years, pointed to a different perpetrator entirely. Marcus Williams walked out of prison on a Tuesday morning in March, Rex waiting for him at the gate with Eleanor Patterson, who had become something of a grandmother figure to them both. The dog, now 12, moved more slowly than before, but his tail wagged with the same enthusiasm he'd shown as a puppy. As I finish telling you this story, I want you to think about something. We live in a world that's quick to judge, quick to condemn, quick to move on to the next headline. But somewhere out there, someone is waiting for justice. Someone is hoping for a second chance. Someone is depending on the loyalty of those who never stopped believing. Rex couldn't speak in a courtroom. He couldn't file appeals or petition governors. All he could do was remember. All he could do was love unconditionally and hope that someday, somehow, that love would matter. Marcus Williams today works at the same animal shelter where Rex once waited for Eleanor Patterson to save his life. He tells visitors that he learned more about faith and loyalty from his dog than from any human being he'd ever met. Rex passed away peacefully 2 years after Marcus's release, surrounded by the 2 people who loved him most. Sometimes the truth isn't found in evidence rooms or courtrooms. Sometimes it's found in the unwavering devotion of a creature who never learned how to give up hope. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more stories that remind us what really matters in life. And remember, sometimes the most important testimony comes from those who can't speak at all. The truth has a way of surfacing, even after 8 long years. Even when it comes on 4 legs, with gray around the muzzle, and a heart that never forgot where home really was.